I am, yeah, but part-time. Part-time, as with everything with me. Part-time journalist, part-time speaker, part-time tour guide, part-time speaker's called a Marxist, part-time layabout. Layabout, let's admit it, layabout. In any case, the theme of the day.
What's the theme of the day?
Is the one you don't. Yes, the one you don't.
I'm banned you from talking about it. I've heard so much.
So it's such a good theme. I'm going to take my coat off. Like that.
Can I ask a question on the thing?
You can if you like.
Yeah. Do you think there'd be?
Spoke about football.
No, but do you think there'd be more MPs from his party all around England in the general election coming up?
Well, that's one of the key questions that comes out of it, isn't it? So Galloway's win, first of all, was a massive blow to the establishment. That's a fact. It was the biggest blow to the establishment they've had in a long time.
Second place, don't forget that.
That's the point. It wasn't just Galloway. You see, people have been waiting for something to happen. And the entire establishment, under COVID, with the Ukraine war, with the Gaza situation, the entire establishment has come all together. And basically they speak with one voice. Labour Party, Liberal Party, Conservative Party, the mass media, the television, the radio, social media giants, fact checkers, they all speak with one tongue, with one voice. And they repeat the same thing. And they want to believe that the arguments that they make to the population are accepted. And of course, most of the time, if you ask the right question, you'll get the right answer. And so they ask the question in such a way: do you support Rishi Sunak, or would you prefer Keir Starmer? Do you support Keir Starmer, or would you prefer, Rishi Sunak? Or do you prefer Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak? Or Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak? Or Angela Rayner or Keir Starmer? And so they rope you in with an endless repetition. They rope you into thinking that everything is fixed, static and normal, and will repeat the same course down the same path all the way that the establishment wants. And of course, the recent by-elections, because for a long time, the newspapers, the television, the pundits, the rest of them have been saying, Labour's going to win a landslide. Labour's set up, and there has been not a word, although they spent 5 years criticising Jeremy Corbyn from morning till night and during the night. Once Corbyn was gone, all the criticism of Labour stopped. Even the mention of anti-Semitism stopped. Until, of course, Joseph Cohen and his friends in Israel decided to launch a barbaric Holocaust, a barbaric genocide against the people of Gaza. And then along comes our old friend, George Galloway. Our old friend George Galloway comes out of the wings, and he's a very astute political player. He knows when to play a game, when to play to mobilise, when to stick in the little pinprick that breaks and explodes the balloon. That is what we saw on Thursday. And you know this is the case because out runs, not only did Keir Starmer poo his pants, but Rishi Sunak.
Absolutely.
Dishy Rishi comes out in front of Downing Street and people were saying, is he about to resign? In the morning they were saying, is he going to resign? And he came on television, stood in front of Downing Street and said, our country is being ruled by the mob. By the mob. Not only by the mob, but George Galloway is now bringing the mob into Parliament.
Fucking not soon enough.
And the members of Parliament, unfortunately, look at John McDonnell. Not a word about Galloway. Jeremy Corbyn. Not a word about Galloway. Not a word. Not a pipsqueak out of their mouths, despite claiming to be opposition. And as you pointed out, Galloway got nearly 40%, and this other guy, Mr. Nobody, non-political Mr. Nobody, Mr. Local Rochdale car dealer, I believe he is. Car dealer, second-hand car dealer.
He should buy Pierce's car.
Gets another 10% or so. So 20%. So in total, 60% of the people in Rochdale voted against the main opposition parties. Out of the blue, the mob comes into politics. Now, over the years during the COVID crisis, don't forget some of us, we were the mob then, weren't we? We were the mob. And he was the leader of the mob. He was the mob leader. Look, here he comes. And when Piers said something like, oh, you know what we should do? He said something like, I think, in a joke he said, wasn't it a joke? It was a joke. A joke. I think we should burn down the offices. Now they're saying, oh my God, members of parliament can't walk the streets without being chased by someone, asking them questions. That's mob rule. Surely the only people who should be able to ask politicians questions are members of parliament themselves. The Right Honourable Member for Bulgaria, the Right Honourable Member for Hammersmith, and the Right Honourable Member for Tooting. These people can ask a question, and then they put it on television. Prime Minister's question time. The Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer, asks a deadly question and makes a joke about Rishi Sunak. And that is supposed to be politics. But of course, politics isn't always in that box. They say mob rule in Britain. What is mob rule?
People like you.
100,000 people, 200,000 people being marched from Hyde Park to the Israeli embassy to stand 300 metres away from the Israeli embassy with TSG police standing in between to listen to 5 speakers who, by the way, for weeks on end had refused to allow George Galloway a platform on the Gaza protests. They refused to allow him to speak because he's so controversial.
Wow.
Why is he so controversial? What's supposed to be so controversial about it? And I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning to check in with the news, saw the great news of Galloway's victory, and I thought to myself, well, this is going to be a laugh. And then you watch the television for the rest of the day. The interview with Sky News was a gem. Because you see, and then the Sky News reporters go, look at these people here, all baying at me, all attacking me. Look at the problems I've got. Because you see, then all of a sudden, the crowd who had voted for Galloway turned around and said, it does say on the end of the park there, pedestrians have priority. Now, Galloway had his whole crowd with him, and they're all baying at the journalists and saying, we have our voice. We're expressing our voice. We're making our mark. You know, there was a Greek philosopher, Archimedes, he once said, give me a fulcrum and I will move the universe. Give me a point of reference and I can change the balance of power in society.
It was the Earth, yes. It was the Earth.
Archimedes. Well,
yeah, not the universe.
Well, you speak
universe is
Greek
is cases.
Okay, move the Earth, move the universe. Move the Earth is fine. Move the Earth. So, the point being is that if you have a reference point, a focal point for the discontent to express itself, it may not be the one you want. It may not be the perfect person or the most wonderful who is the most perfect person, apart from me and Piers Corbyn, of course. Who is the perfect person? Nobody. But you see, then you get this opening. And the opening exposes the entire lies, not only of the last few years, which is the concentrated expression of, but of decades and decades. Britain, and Galloway, to be fair, has always stood firm on this. Britain has been an agent of global imperialist slaughter for decades and hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. So they pretend that these events in Gaza are some isolated events. They are not isolated events. They are part and parcel of the long history of British imperialism backing the Zionists and backing imperial and dictatorial power all around the world to plunder the world, to stuff their own pockets and enrich themselves. That's the reality of British imperialism. So those people who scream and shout, oh, Galloway's gone to the Muslims. Well, the interesting thing about that is Galloway also is well known as the supporter of the Soviet Union, the atheist state, supporter of China, the atheist state, and yet the Muslims had no problem in voting for him. No problem in voting for him. Not only that, they said, oh, there's 30% Muslim. It isn't 30% Muslim voters in Rochdale. It's not. It's less than 20%. So in other words, the white working class and the Muslim working class, or the Indian descent Muslim working class, Pakistani generally, they voted for Galloway. So in other words, the stance he took, which was right, a workers' organisation, trying to build a workers' is the correct stance to take. Because that smashes the illusion or the delusion promoted by the Labour Party that they are somehow representatives of the workers. How do they represent the workers? How? Where do they represent the workers? Nowhere. They don't stand up for workers' rights on housing, on education, on healthcare, on welfare, in relation to the employers at work, in the trade unions. They never stand up for the rights of the workers. And I was a Labour Party member from 17 years of age until till 2019. So they can't say that this is a Labour organisation. It has nothing to do with the interests of the working class. Only the name. Only the name. So Galloway has stood up. Who's being shot? That's the extremism they're talking about. Taking over the streets already. They talk about extremism.
Is the police shooting the speakers?
They are saying it is extreme to demonstrate against the destruction and slaughter of the people in Gaza. That is supposed to be extreme. They say if you go on a demonstration against the Israeli state and their goons, then you are an anti-Semite. You're a supporter of the Holocaust. You're a denier of the fate of the Jewish people. That is a lie. And that's what Galloway has exposed, by the way. That the mass of people in Britain, if you actually go to them, if you had a base strong enough and you went to them across the country, they would reject the Tory party. They would reject the Labour Party, they would reject the Liberal Party, they will reject the Reform Party. So it is perfectly true, not only in Britain, by the way, not only in Britain, across Europe, and by the way in the United States, that if you give a lead opposing what's been going, opposing the interests of big business, opposing the COVID hysteria, opposing the war in Gaza, standing up for the rights of the overwhelming majority of the working class and the poor, you will gain a majority in society. And once upon a time I used to think, well, one day the Labour Party will change and the people will move to Labour. They did it under his brother. And then they did everything in their power, nationally and internationally, led by a Zionist lobby from Israel, to overthrow the leader of the Labour Party in Britain. And they succeeded. And they succeeded. So now you have to build an alternative to that. And that alternative, it doesn't matter whether you like it or not, has come in the form of George Galloway. All praise to that development. All praise to that development, in my view. It is an opening that will that at least has the potential to transform politics, not only in Britain but internationally. So I'm fully in support of what Galloway did. And some people said to me, "Oh, look, Galloway was useless on COVID." He was useless on COVID, as I was at the very beginning. But the question, we know for a fact that because 80, 90% or 80% took the vaccines, that we aren't, those of us who opposed what happened under COVID are not in a majority. That's a simple fact. Now, I think the mood has changed on that, and I think even those who say that the whole thing was a fraud can get 40, 50% of the vote, because people have wide enough eyes to have learned from the experience. And how do we know this? Because now they still offer you COVID jabs, but nobody goes. Nobody queues up anymore.
Rejected.
Nobody's running up there. Where's the COVID bus? Where's my vaccine?
only the ones
Where's
who
my
have to
jab?
take it.
Nobody is doing that. And by the way, starting with the nurses and doctors, they have some of the very, very lowest vaccination rates. And I bet the police are not going either. Or have you had your 5th COVID jab, officer? In your case, it might help. That's only a joke.
Only a joke, yeah, only a joke.
Only a joke. I didn't mean it.
Only a joke.
So what type of programme is it that can galvanise the people? Not only in Britain, but internationally. What does Galloway's election illustrate? Down with imperialist wars. Down with the connection between Britain and Israel. Break the connection. Sever the bond. Sever the bond between Britain and the United States as a lackey for the United States. Down with the war in Ukraine. It's nothing to do with us. Gaza has something to do with us because we supplied the weapons. We support the government. We back them up in their fascistic, murderous activity that happens on a daily basis. And even the French, who want to send soldiers to Ukraine, are now turning around and saying, well, really, is it wise to kill 100 people? Even the Americans are dropping food now in parachutes yesterday on the people, because it does not look good on television to have people starving to death on the screen while the Israelis and the British and Americans back Israel, back the Netanyahu's government. So this is an issue that's galvanised the people, as I said. It's galvanised the people. Millions of young people around the world. This is the first major war or slaughter they've seen. And it's quite obvious to them that this is a one-sided barbarity carried out by our allies, which Britain and America are responsible for as surely as Netanyahu is responsible for. And you see, then the question comes, well, if you're not spending the money on the weapons and you're not backing Israel, what should we do with the resources of the country? And what happens to them? We should take the resources, the big banks, the big industries, into public ownership. We should house the people, provide them with food, shelter, free electricity, free gas, free water, free transport. We aren't in the Middle Ages. We are one of the most wealthy countries on earth. We can easily afford free gas, free electricity, free basic food, free shelter, free healthcare. We can easily afford those things. And yet, the world is being turned into its opposite. A tiny handful of billionaires are accumulating the entire wealth of the world in their hands. Sorry?
How many people homeless in the world?
Yes, that's why
There's
that's
about
why they're
1
on there.
billion
That's why they're on there.
There are
Yeah.
nearly a fifth of the world's population are officially homeless. Nearly a fifth of the world's population. And so there are, on the other side, 8 individuals, 8 people, the wealthiest 8, own more personal wealth than half of the world's population. These are the realities behind the war in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, and the COVID fraud they carried out on us. These are the realities of what's behind these things. So we have to mobilise the people, transform the balance of power in the world, from the poor to gain control of their lives, from the workers to gain control of their lives, and to oust the entire class of politics, mass media and the establishment. Drive them all out of office. Yes, if that's extreme, then yes, we must be extremists. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Well done, Hi Coach. Yes. Well done, well done, well done.
didn't have no time for questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, please.
Stop that.
I'll do it now.